So I'd like to give a very big welcome to Denbydale Radio Club, to club members and visitors to the club. This week, I'm really pleased to have in front of us a radio ham, Steve, AG4W, who spiked my interest when he wrote an article about having been a radio ham for 50 years and done everything else in the hobby, dabbled with everything else in the hobby in that 50-year period, except for Moonbounce, and decided he wanted to give Moonbounce a try. And I found the article that Steve wrote, I think in CQ magazine, Steve, very interesting, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought, I'm definitely going to invite Steve to come along, because I know in our last 2 years worth of nearly weekly online meetings, we've never had a meeting specifically on Moonbounce. We've had a meeting about satellites and the space station, but never on Moonbounce. So Steve, I'm going to hand the microphone over to you and let you take it from there. You'll need to unmute, Steve.
Okay, we're unmuted. I'm going to hit the share screen. And do you all see my screen?
We can indeed, Steve, yeah.
That's great. First is a short introduction to who I am. I am mostly retired. I did work part-time last year. And as Nick had said, I've had a number of people say, are you a DXer or a contester? And that's because I've been heavily involved in both. I'm part of the North Alabama DX Club. I'm part of the Alabama Contest Group. Probably my most exciting contesting was in 2019. I went to D4C and participated multi with them, and we won the world in the phone competition. That was way fun. I've also worked over at NQ4I and won a number of contests with them. DX wise, DXCC challenge at about the 2700 level, an honor roll. But I'm also an experimenter. I'm an engineer by trade. I've also run both large and small companies. And so that's kind of once over the world. As Nick had mentioned, I've done all kinds of different things over the years. I haven't just been DXing and contesting. I've done satellite stuff, slow scan TV, actually participated in the old mechanical RIDI. Love RIDI contesting, portable operations, mountain topping, meteor scatter, all kinds of crazy things. But the one thing I hadn't done was Moonbounce. And it piqued my interest because I'd heard that large EME stations could work 100 watts in a single Yagi. And I thought that was like, holy cow, I can do this. And I don't even have to spend much money. By the way, I'm a cheap ham too, like most of them. So I said, we're gonna go do this. And so the first comment is why work EME? Well, to me, it's the ultimate DX contact. Almost 500,000 miles of path. It's some of the most difficult contacts that you'll ever make. It's like working Amsterdam Island on 160 or double hop E-skip on 6 meters into Eastern Europe from the US. It's just plain exciting. It's an experimenter's dream come true. There's a lot of things that I've done that you'll see that are my own design. I'm not sure whether y'all use the expression bucket list over in the UK. Sometimes over here they call it a life list, but it's the things you want to do before you crap out. And it certainly was on my list. If you're a contester, there's 2 weekends a year in October and November for Moonbounce, and you clearly want to have your station up for those 2 weekends. So that's kind of why I went to work on Moonbounce. It is a challenge. I mean, there's any one of these items here by itself, no big deal. But when you put them all together, it becomes a huge deal. First off, there's a big path loss, about 250 dB between perigee and apogee, which is the closest and furthest from the moon. Only about 6% of your signal that reaches the moon comes back to you. You got a thing called Faraday Rotation. That's probably one of the more bizarre things. I use now horizontal polarization, but as it goes up and comes back, your polarity rotates. And sometimes horizontal guys can hear horizontal guys. Sometimes the horizontal guy can only hear the vertical guys. And if you don't hear, you just have to wait. You say, well, how long do you have to wait? It can be a short period of time, or sometimes you just don't hear anything. Spatial polarity, when you're looking at the moon from different locations, it puts it out of phase. Well, Faraday rotation actually helps make that work. So if you didn't have that, and in both you had horizontal polarization, you'd never get to talk to each other if you didn't have spatial polarity. You have a thing called libration fading. That's due to the rocking of the moon and the bouncing off the jumbled surface. That can result in 6 to 10 dB of loss. A big one is sky noise. I'll show you a chart later that shows you what parts of the month you can forget about even working Moonbounce because you're pointed right at the Milky Way or the sun, and just give it up. That's a part of the month you just don't think about. Doppler is another issue. So what made me get interested in all this and made it look possible? Well, in a word, it's Joe Taylor came along with WSJT and now WSJTX and JT65. JT65 uses 64 tones in a sync tone. The sync is interspersed with the message that's sent half the time. So when you actually see a signal on the screen, you'll see a straight line when you see a signal, and that's your sync signal. The transmissions are about a minute. Each QSO is 5 or 6 minutes, and that's if everything's going well. When you're transmitting, it's literally key down for almost a minute. That's extremely hard on your amplifiers, coax, and antennas. Those of you that have worked RTTY before and gotten into RTTY contests, there's a lot of amplifiers and things that die. That's certainly the case with Moonbounce. You hear a lot about overheated amplifiers and such when people are on for a while, particularly in the contests. You do have special codes like RO, RRR, and 73. That's just alternating 2 tones. So you actually see 2 straight lines on the screen, and they're a fixed spacing. So you pretty much know when people are sending those things to you. On Moonbounce, most people are using JT65B, which has a tone spacing of 5.4 hertz and a 355 hertz passband. So the cool thing about this, and what makes it possible for the little guy, is that you can make QSOs that are 10 to 15 dB below the minimum required for CW. I can tell you probably 90% of the QSOs I make, it may even be 95%, I never hear a signal. That's pretty wild. And there's a new mode now, it's Q65. It's taking over for JT65. And it'll be interesting to see how long it'll take before that transition happens. What was my original plan? Well, my original plan didn't turn out to be the end plan, but I had an FT857 that worked all mode. It's the little Yaesu transceiver. I had gotten a small brick amplifier, a Mirage brick that was 160 watts that had a preamp in it. I had to fix the preamp. I bought it broken. Got that thing working. I was thinking about putting that amp and the preamp right at the antenna so I wouldn't lose any power. I had an old satellite antenna. It was a cross-polarized Cushcraft antenna. I was going to take it apart, just make it a single polarization. I had 2 old rotors, a G450 that I could use for azimuth and an old Alliance 10 rotor for elevation. I had a short piece of Barryflex, and I figured I'd mount this thing pretty close to the house so I wouldn't lose much there. I would use the West Mountain Radio Advantage rig blaster with the 857. And of course, any of you that worked FT8 or any of the digital modes, I use VKT time sync for stabilization of the clock. So that was my plan going into things. What did I end up really doing? Well, that turned out a little bit different. For my first 12 QSOs, which I made in the EME contest, interestingly enough, none of them were with the US station. One of the things that I found fascinating about Moonbounce is the Europeans are far more active in it than the States. And that was kind of neat. I modified the satellite antenna and decided after I got it started, instead of a single Yagi, I'd make two 11-element loop-fed arrays. I had read about loop-fed arrays and saw that they were a good match for 50 ohms, so I designed the antenna around that, took that old Cushcraft elements, and that gave me an 18 dB antenna with 31 dB of front to back ratio. As soon as I started telling some of the folks I was interested in this, one of the club members here said, well, I've got a 400 watt 2-meter amplifier I'll let you have for $200. And I couldn't resist that. So the Mirage got put away even before it got used for Moonbounce. And I used this FAA amplifier. Well, the FAA didn't use them at 400 watts. It was really used at a much lower level, but the duty cycle of that thing is just unbelievable. So you can run it at 400 watts even for a minute key down. The only downside of that thing is it's just noisy as all get out. The fan runs at 400. It's off a 400 hertz supply, and it just makes a hell of a racket. I made a homebrew sequencer you can see down there in the left picture. I just made it on a perf board. I decided to mount, I had an old AAR preamp, advanced receiver research preamp I got and for satellite use, and mounted that at the antenna. Used it with the 857 with a little high stability oscillator I got from eBay. And I made the first 12 QSOs. Now, that may sound, wow, 12 QSOs. Recognize I made that in 2 contest weekends. That's 4 nights of contesting and making 12 contacts. For those of you that have listened to a lot of noise in a 160 meter contest, that's a lot of sitting around and a lot of trying and not much success. But I tell you, I was so excited the first time I made that first contact, and I made it with I2FAK. So you'd say, well, geez, that's really amazing. Well, the amazing part is like a lot of DX contacts, I think there's somebody that does the heavy lifting, and with his 16 antennas, each with 19 elements, he obviously did the heavy lifting. But I nonetheless was damn impressed. I had made my first Moonbounce contact, and that gives you a screen of WSJT, and it shows you what happens there. He sends you your call and his call with an OOO. I heard you're calling me. I send him an RO and he sends an RRR, and we send a 73 and we made a contact. Pretty cool. And that happened in October. For those of you that think that you're shooting at something that's giant, it seems like when you look up at the moon, it seems small. It seems small until you start, or pretty good size until you start trying to do Moonbounce, and you can see at the end of this antenna, there's the moon. And that's a 1-inch wide boom. You got 0.52 degrees viewed from Earth. So what's this LFA Yagi all about? Well, before I got too far with it, I immediately decided, it's not going to be too hard to add 2 more elements to this thing. So I added 2 more elements to each of the Yagis and 6 more feet of boom. That added another dB of gain. The one reason I looked at the LFA antennas, it's got better side rejection than a number of other designs. G0 KSC is extreme. It's Justin. He's extremely helpful with the LFA designs. Even if you do your own, he sells them through Innov Antennas. But I can tell you, I had told him I wasn't using an insulated boom, and he sent me the exact measurements for a non-insulated boom. He's just a really fantastic guy. The 50 ohm match on an LFA is by design, and nothing goes up to heat in the transformer. And so what's and the first thing I did was my first one on the top there was horizontal polarization. Well, it wasn't long for me to figure out that the metal boom probably made some distortion to the pattern. So then I turned it into a two vertically polarized antennas, and it worked a little bit better. What's the pattern look like? That's the pattern for the single antenna of a 13 element antenna. You can see the side and backs are just amazingly attenuated. Where that's really important, and I live on a 6.5 acre lot out in the middle of pretty much nowhere, but I still have neighbors that have things like electric fences and those goofy new LED light bulbs and such. And what saves you with Moonbounce is if you point right at the horizon, you do get ground gains. So you actually, if you had a really quiet location, you actually have a better chance at a contact right at the horizon. But for most people, even me, as you get up about 20 or 25 degrees, then this nice pattern gets rid of your neighbors and all the other noise, and you get to hear a pretty quiet situation, and that's way good. So I started and was going to use an Alliance tenor rotor for elevation. One of the problems with that is the old Alliance tenor rotors only worked in 10-degree increments, and that's really not good enough. So I upgraded that and got a Yaesu elevation rotor. As I mentioned, because I went to the FAA amplifier, I had to put together a preamp box, which I put right at the antenna. The closer you can get your preamp to the antenna, unless you've got really, really good coax going to your antenna, is really going to help your ability to hear things. What that requires you to do is to have some good relays up there. I purchased some mil-spec $1,000 relays for $35 at Hamfest. You'd never want to buy those things new. It would be absolutely ridiculous. But it is amazing how often you see those in a big giant box of junk, and you just got to know what you're looking for. When I went to buy that amplifier, the guy said, you know, you really need some good feed line. I'm going to give you some Heliax, some hard line. And of course, I was hoping it wasn't the 75 ohm stuff that the cable guys use, and it wasn't. It was actual 50 ohm hard line. Right at the antenna, I converted it back to something that's flexible. What I can tell you is I used the really good stuff on trying to seal it. And lo and behold, recently, after 4 years, I had water actually collect in one of those connectors, and I made the huge mistake of assuming that connection was a known good, and tore just about everything apart before I figured that out. I should have trusted the time domain reflectometer that I had that said that it was bad. So in 2017, as a summary, I added the 2 more elements. I finally figured out after I blew up my preamp once that my sequencer wasn't so great, so I purchased one from UA3QLC at the Dayton Hamfest. And by the 2017-2018 timeframe, WSJ-TX came along, version 1.7 and 1.9, which improved upon his original decoding. So that was nice improvements too. This shows you the difference between WSJ-T and WSJ-TX. On WSJ-TX, you can see what a sync line looks like going up and down there, what the screen looks like, what you're receiving, and what you're transmitting. There's what I'm getting from, in this case, YL2GC. He heard me calling him, and I responded with an RO. He responded with an RR, and I responded with a 73. It's way important that you get a good sequencer. Somebody warned me that I shouldn't design my own. You can buy one for $20, and so I did. And it was a good investment. I threw it in an old case that I had for a piece of IT equipment. Had to do some rewiring, and after that I didn't blow up preamps because of the sequencer. I did blow them up another time because of a wiring disconnection. The whole idea of the sequencer is you don't want to transmit your high power into your preamp. It's been done, and I can tell you it makes a hell of a mess. It looks almost like you hit it with lightning. So the whole idea is you want to transfer your preamp out of the circuit and then put your amplifier in and then apply the tone. And then you do everything in reverse on the way out. So what happened in 2019? Well, 2019, I had gone to Dayton and bought a parts for an amplifier, and that allowed me to upgrade to near a kilowatt from 400 watts. I substituted out the Yaesu 857 for the new, or then new, IC 9700 from ICOM. Of course, some of you have probably read that it's not totally stable, particularly at super high frequencies like the 1.2 gigahertz. I did add a GPS disciplined oscillator I picked up over at Friedrichshafen. And by the way, Europe definitely holds a fantastic ham fest. I moved back to horizontal polarization. After listening to it a while, I finally figured out that I think I had a better shot at being horizontally polarized. There seemed to be a lot of horizontal to horizontal communications with Europe. And by 2019, I had made 99 QSOs on EME. For those of you that are interested, out of the first 100 QSOs, only 25 were with the US, and almost all the rest were from Europe. So what's this amplifier all about? Well, one of the friends that I was with and walking around the flea market at Dayton, I saw this thing, and the guy wanted $500 for an amplifier and 3 power supplies. And I looked at it and, chatted with my friend about how that, the market for a kilowatt on 2 meters is almost nothing. And I don't know how anyone's ever going to sell something like this, but I said, for $200, I'd take this thing away. And we finally settled on $260. What it was it had 2 1250 watt per device power amplifiers in there, and you had three power supplies. Each were 48 volts at 25 amps a piece. It was part of a Harris FM transmitter that had been converted and could run on 2 meters. So what I needed was then a way to cool the thing. I needed splitters and combiners and monitoring circuitry and that sort of thing. The power supply needed to be sorted out to run it in redundant parallel operation. It is a switching power supply, and one of the things I quickly found out is where they'd normally be used, the noise wouldn't be a problem, but on Moonbounce it is. So I had to put in some noise reduction circuitry. I had an old case that was part of a Palomar tuner. And, so I used the case from the Palomar tuner. I bought 2 very high volume fans and used that chassis, made a circuit for high and low speed fan. Most of the time it's always run on high speed. And so that's what it looked like when I just put the power supply and the thing in there. Then as time went on and through 2022, I had to do some amplifier noise reduction. What I did in between, believe it or not, and still do occasionally, is there 1-minute transmissions. When I'm not transmitting, I actually shut the power supplies off. and then turn them on again right before I transmit. So it gets a little busy in the station when you have to shut your amplifier off and turn it back on before you key again. Most recently, I bought a new quiet computer. I didn't know it was quiet until after I got it. The original Lenovo computer I had was too noisy, and I had to use a really cheap old laptop, which was frustrating as all get out. We're now up to WSJT 2.5.2, which added the Q65. On the top right there, you can see my old insulator design. I had a number of issues. Most recently, after we had some problems with Balun, I made a new insulator design. I actually bought a power divider from Innov Antennas. It's rated at high power. I ended up melting the, originally I used two 75 ohm RG11 coax, which was supposed to be good for 700 or 800 watts. I ended up melting the Balun on that and melting the coax to the boom at 700 or 800 watts after a number of contacts. I improved my watt meter. One of the things that happened in the last year, which has been extremely frustrating, I've had 2 lightning strikes in 1 year. My last lightning strike before that was 2012. In 2012, I made the mistake of a guy at our local club gave a presentation on improving your lightning capability to withstand that at your station. And I said, I don't know why I'd ever do that, because I've never been hit by lightning since 1965, and that was in 2012. 2 weeks later, I got hit by lightning. So I learned my lesson about bragging about not getting hit by lightning. Don't ever do that. This year I've gotten hit twice. I can tell you it's probably one of the most demoralizing things that can happen to you. It destroyed both the IC 9700, my FT DX101, and virtually every piece of equipment in the shack. And you say, well, you do all, and I've got a lightning box outside where all the cables come in through lightning arresters and all that stuff. You get a direct lightning strike, you're in deep trouble. I did recently, in the last 2 weeks, have my Yaesu 450 rotor fail. I had an opportunity to pick up an Alpha SPID RAU rotor, which I think I'm going to replace it with. I've been testing that. That looks like it's a pretty nice improvement. And so by the end of 2021, I've made 308 EME QSOs with 228 unique stations and 153 grids confirmed in 43 countries. If somebody had told me back in 2016 I would have worked over 228 unique stations, I would have told them they were absolutely crazy. The new power divider I put together now uses LMR 500 coax, and I'm hoping with the new setup I'm going to be able to run maybe 1200 watts. I don't think too many hams can brag they burned up a watt meter. Well, I have. I had a CN801. They advertised the thing as a 2 kilowatt watt meter, and I thought that was plenty enough. But I noticed that when I was running 800 watts, you could hardly even touch the connectors on the back of the thing. It was so hot. And when I cranked the thing up a little, before I knew it, the center picture shows I had torched a number of the components in the thing. So I figured I'd just upgrade to the CN901. It's a 3 kilowatt watt meter. Surely that would work. Well, long and the short got just as hot, so I knew I was in trouble. And they don't advertise this, but when you actually buy the meter and if you actually read the manual and read the very fine print, it says that it won't work for more than a kilowatt on 2 meters. And I can tell you at 800 watts, it really doesn't work. So I next upgraded and bought myself a coaxial dynamics watt meter. That thing's just like a bird watt meter. It's a fantastic watt meter. Recently I picked up a Wavenode WN2D watt meter. That's a nice watt meter. You can get get pickups for it for any frequency range, any power. And it has a cool feature on it that it has auxiliary channels. And I'm actually using the auxiliary channels to monitor the temperature in my amplifier. So that was one of the attractive things about having that. I told you earlier about Moonbounce propagation and that it's good some days of the month. Well, you see this big red spike here? That big red spike is when you've got problems with noise, either, and it's from the Milky Way. And it basically says in these 6 days out of the month, give it up. You're wasting your time. And when you see the red line down here, that's when you should be planning on operating. And this particular website actually tells you, here's the 5 best days of the month. And you can see the 5 best days are going to be rocking along here and also in this area right here. Now, occasionally the Moonbounce competition or something will come up a little bit above the line. You can still make Moonbounce QSOs here. There was a fella in England that wanted very badly from the first time I got on Moonbounce to make a contact, and we tried over and over and over for years and years. Finally, last year I made contact with him, and Steve, it's G4 or G0 TRA, I think it is. I've worked him twice now. He has a single Yagi and 400 watts. So I'm able to work a single Yagi and 400 watts when the wind's at my back and everything is working perfectly on both sides. I routinely work other 2 Yagi stations. I have worked lower power 2 antenna stations like the 160 watts with 2 antennas. So it kind of gives you a flavor for what's possible when things are really good. Just like you have spotting on HF, the spotting is a lot more friendly and a lot more robust on Moonbounce. There's this WSJT, and it's at chris.org. It's a fantastic way to hook up with other folks that are you can spot yourself, which you don't normally do, but on Moonbounce you do spot yourself, and people will then listen for you calling CQ, and there's a lot of chat that goes back and forth, and either other stations that have already worked you will tell you that they're hearing you today, so you don't feel like you're just talking to the wall, which a lot of times Moonbounce, it seems like that. But you can see by some of the comments there, and by the way, the people on Moonbounce are just off the chart fantastic. The amount of help they'll give you if you're having issues, even offline, they'll get with you and give you some suggestions to try and make things better. It's a very, very nice community. So on the left shows the left side of my station, which is the Moonbounce side, and shows the 2 rotors, the amplifier, the IC9700, and I had switched out my Russian sequencer. I had gotten from Nestata DX Engineering sequencer, which was like over the top, way good. It turned out I ended up blowing the Russian sequencer up in the second lightning strike. The second lightning strike virtually took everything out in the shack, and that's another whole topic in and of itself. It's amazing some of the sneak paths you have that you don't know you have, and all you need to do is get it into like your 12-volt power supply, one item that runs on 12 volts, and then it gets into all the other 12 volts and kills everything. And it's pretty remarkable. The direct hit was on my 40 meter. I've got a 3-element parasitic array and a low frequency 8 circle array for receiving, and it kind of hit both those things, and it was very nasty. So in conclusion, this is a fantastic thing to get into if you're an experimenter, a DXer, or a contester. I can tell you it's highly addictive. You get started in this, and you haven't put any money into it, you will. It could result in you losing interest in other hobbies and other bands or modes. And I can tell you one of the other reasons I did it is a DXer at the low sunspots of the last 3 or 4 years. Yes, you can work the low bands, but it's nice to have some other choices. As you saw with me, upgrades can happen even before the original approach is finished. You're going to learn patience. I had one interesting QSO with Japan, and I had not worked Japan before. It's a little hard to work because you're both kind of don't have a whole lot of time with the moon together. But he spent 30 minutes with me making a contact, and most of us kind of have after 10 or 15 minutes of a try, we just kind of politely say, we'll try again some other day. No, he kept saying, Steve, have patience, this will work. And sure enough, it did. So QSOs can take a long time. You can imagine sitting there alternating 1 minute at a time for 30 minutes. The high from a QSO is hard to beat. When I first got on, Alabama was extremely rare as a state. A lot of people had not worked Alabama. Rhode Island was also very high on people's lists. And so I didn't have to worry too much about QSLs because a lot of people did want one from Alabama. I am on Logbook of the World and like that. And as I mentioned, superstations are very eager to help you with advice and help you with contacts. The other thing I'd mention is that your preamplifier at the antenna, or if you use hardline, you can bring it indoors because you only have about a half dB of loss if a short stint out to the antenna, like with hardline. The antenna gain and your power output is way, way, way more important than the radio. Getting the new radio was nice, and it's a fun radio to use, but the radio is not the thing that's going to make or break that you're getting in the Moonbounce contest. If you're going to spend an extra dollar, spend it on one of the other 3 items. Your antenna is the best because you get the biggest bang for your buck by adding to the antenna, and so work there first, just like I did, and then and you'll get to understand whether you're hearing more than you can work. If you're hearing more than you work, guess what? It's probably time to add a little power. If your people are hearing you more than them, then work on the other side of it. So that's what I have to share about Moonbounce. I didn't make it a particularly technical presentation like last week's presentation. Although my background is electrical engineering, I do a lot of my own design. I find a lot of folks get put to sleep by that, and I like to make sure they don't fall asleep when I talk. So do we have any questions?
Brilliant. Okay, let me just stop sharing for a second, Steve. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Steve. That was absolutely great. I really enjoyed it. Who wants to go first with a question to Steve? Who's the first one with a question? Yes, Russell.
So, Steve, thanks. A very interesting talk there. But I noticed you said you changed over from vertical to horizontal polarization for your antennas. I'm just wondering if all these stations that are different parts of the world, obviously they're going to be rotated in a different manner to bounce signals off the moon. So, does it really make that big a difference as to what polarization you've got?
Well, the first comment I'd make on that, and I didn't mention it, if you have the wherewithal, you should have both vertical and horizontal polarization. So that and all the big stations, like that Italian station I showed you, he has both polarizations. And those guys can switch. And I've even had some interesting QSOs where he has to switch between his transmit and receive. And that's a really odd thing where you think that if you're best on transmit, you'd be best on receive. And we've had some really odd ones where we've had the guy that can swap, actually, he may hear you best on horizontal, but you can't hear him transmit on horizontal. You have to hear him transmit on vertical. Don't understand why that happens. What I can tell you is that it appeared to me most of the stations start with horizontal polarization. Very, very few start with vertical. And so you got a whole bunch of people out there with horizontal. And for whatever reason, between here and Europe, horizontal to horizontal seems to be more frequent. And you have better chance of doing better that way. It's just a gut feel that that's worked out better for me. Obviously, it did take some effort to do that. I had to get some fiberglass and design. It's actually multi-cord fiberglass to be able to withstand that much weight and not fall apart on you. But you do want a fiberglass boom anyway. Even with vertical polarization, I think it's a good idea not to have that big long metal element there. So I was going to do it anyway. I had a gut feel that horizontal would work better based on what I had seen before. And part of it was just in contests and operations, just seeing how often I seem to have openings versus other people in the States running horizontal. It just seemed like the guys with horizontal were doing better.
Sure.
That's not a very scientific answer, but it's as good as you're getting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Emmanuel, CT7IFR, you had your hand up.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Steve, for your presentation. I enjoy it very much. I am not even yet a newbie in Moonbounce because I am still studying a way to get on my first steps on setting up a system to work Moonbounce. Right now, I am trying to listen only the Graves radar from France, trying to hear its echo on the VHF, and once I get to hear it on the moon, I'll try to transmit something. I raised my hand earlier, but because I was curious about that polarization thing, and I was thinking about why not using circular polarization. Then I finally plugged my my intelligence, if I may say, and I remember that the polarization, if it is in one order, it comes back in the other, and the attenuation will be even worse. So I guess I don't need to ask that silly question anymore.
I have heard folks actually use circular polarization. I thought it was a compromise, and the reason they're using that is a lot of the satellites use the circular polarization. That's what I had used before, and I wouldn't recommend that.
You wouldn't, or you would?
I would not.
Okay. Thank you.
And by the way, if you have a choice first, like I did, you know, I could have just made a vertical and horizontally polarized, because that's what the antenna was before. It was circular polarized, but it's essentially just a vertical and horizontal, and you could put a switch between the two. Mm-hmm. And I could have made a 10 or 11 element single Yagi. If you're starting off small, you're better off making two horizontal ones or two vertical ones with more gain than starting off with lower gain and having the switchable polarization. You're going to need all the gain you can get to make those first few contacts, and worry about switching the polarization after you've, I could probably start looking at doing the switchable polarization now, because I've got a station that's kind of getting up on the capability, and that would allow me more flexibility to work folks when I couldn't otherwise work them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Emmanuel. Anyone else with a question for for Steve. Yeah, Dennis. Need to unmute, Dennis. You're still on mute, Dennis.
There you go.
Yeah, hi Steve. Do you do any computer tracking, or do you do it all manually for the moon?
I did get a computer tracker for the rotors. The funny part about it was that and I got it all installed and got that PSK rotor program and got all that working. And then I had the first lightning strike, and I've actually with this new alpha spid rotor that I'm putting together, I'm gonna that's going to be a project, but I've been doing all manually tracking. The moon doesn't move that fast. It's pretty sluggish. It's not like trying to do the low Earth orbit satellites. I used to work the Molybdenum, I forget how you pronounce that, but it was the old high Earth orbit satellites, AO10, 13, and 40. I loved working those because you had, the whole Earth you could see, and it was up there for a long time, and those were a lot of fun. I don't like the ones that have the, 15 minutes of fame kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, Steve, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Peter, G4URT. Peter, you're on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
How's that over?
That's
Is that
it.
good? Okay, thank you. Yeah, Steve, it's good to put a face. We have actually worked off the moon. You are my 571st initial off the moon. And ironically, my first contact was with the late lamented KB8RQ, Gary. One thing I would like to emphasize with your talk was the friendliness and the helpfulness of all of the EME community that I had from day one, which was 10 years ago now. Anybody out there who's thinking about having a go, give it a go, because you'll get nothing but help. And how can I put it? Unlike some radio aspects, nobody will ever talk down to you. It's always positive.
I absolutely agree with that, Peter. I've never heard anybody call anyone a fool. And it's easy to make mistakes. Almost everybody that starts out has difficulties and the thing, but the people are very, very patient. They also just really appreciate somebody new.
Yeah.
Just like you say, you've worked 500 stations, I guess. That's absolutely incredible. And I recognized your call as soon as you started talking there, and yep, I've heard him. And it is and if I don't do anything with this conversation, it's, I hope I get one of you to at least try it. And I think if you try it, and I bet that at least two of you already have the capability, because, a lot of people have, I've worked grid squares on 6 meters. To me, it's kind of neat working 6 meter e-skip to Europe in the summertime. It's another challenge, but the people are just incredible on Moonbounce, and Peter's got it, and you got somebody there right there that you can contact. You don't have to talk to me. You can talk to Peter. He should have been giving this presentation. He's got twice the experience of me.
Yeah, well, thanks for that.
Peter, I was going to ask you, Steve's given me a good segue to that one. I was going to ask you what your setup is there. What antennas and power are you using down there, Peter?
I run 4 9-element OWLs from G0KSC on a vertical and horizontal, because I like to switch between. HLV 1000 BCO amplifier. I transferred everything down from a Elecraft K3 to a MET XP transverter. A couple of very good preamps up at the mast. it's taken 10 years to kind of, it evolves. Well, it evolves and my bank balance goes down.
Yeah, I think that's probably the one thing we can agree on, that it evolves. And the other, I don't know whether you're the same way, but about half the time, my EME station is not workable. Like right now, if the rotor's not working, I'm always in a process of having either to fix or upgrade or do something.
Oh yes, it's definitely a case of keep your wallet under control. So at least with EME, with 2 meters, there's always meteor scatter as well.
Yes. By the way, if you guys haven't tried 6 meter meteor scatter, that's another really fun mode.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Peter, and thanks.
No, thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing your station there. Yeah, thank you. Right, anyone else with a question to Steve? And if I don't see, yeah, David, M0ODM.
Yeah, good evening. First of all, thank you very much indeed for a wonderful talk. Very much enjoyed that. Fascinating subject. This is going to be a crazy question from a complete newbie who hasn't even tried it. Is it at all possible not to use digital, but to actually get a voice EME? Is that at all possible, please?
Absolutely is. I just saw on Twitter, I forget who did it recently, but I have heard well enough to work another station on CW. I didn't do it, but as I said, probably 5 to 10% of the contacts I work, particularly these really large stations, when propagation is good, I can hear the station and could work them CW. Working them on phone, it's probably 2 of the giant guys working each other. And it is possible. As I said, I saw a guy on Twitter that was bragging about his sideband QSO. It's a lot of them will do it not on 2 meters though, but they'll do it on one of the higher frequency bands. By the way, you don't have to work 2 meters for EME. It just happens to be the one that has the most popularity. It's probably the easiest from getting equipment and looking at the size of the antennas and the complication of running power and that sort of thing. There's been, with the advent of the IC9700 coming out, you've seen a lot of folks starting to move up to 1.2 gigahertz for Moonbounce. There is activity on 430, so there are other opportunities. If you get one band taken care of, you can set up something for one of the other bands.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I did wonder with the 9700, we're now moving up, and we've got the first of the sort of 3-band radios now getting popularized, very much like the 7300 has done quite a lot. ICOM have widened the market there. So I'm hoping that there's going to be more sort of UHF traffic, not only for EME, but also terrestrial as well.
I believe that's going to help.
Yeah, the obvious attraction, Steve, for those of us that don't have huge amounts of real estate, and most of us don't in this country, a small island, is the higher frequency you get, the larger the antenna with a larger gain for the smaller space as well, haven't you? So,
well, and I hope that's something that you got out of looking at the picture of my antenna. It's not a huge antenna, and it's very close to the ground, which is something I like. I've over the last few years, I've gotten a bit of vertigo, so I try to stay off the tower that I got the quad on now. It's not a good idea to get far off the ground with vertigo. Bad things can happen. But there's no reason to have to necessarily put an antenna up high. Now, it may help you with getting rid of some of the noise nearby, but you don't have to do that. And those of you that have covenants too, in the US, it's become very popular for neighborhoods to not allow antennas. You can kind of hide a low antenna, and this, could be a low antenna you could hide in your backyard too.
yeah, I live in one of those, Steve. We got a covenant on our developments, and all the antennas are hidden. Okay, right. Anyone else got a question to Steve? I'm just going to say, if I don't see you, just unmute and come in.
Roger?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. That's interesting. Just a quick technical question. Those GPS DOs you've got, they're very expensive. Is that essential? What sort of accuracy do you really need?
The GPS disciplined oscillator I got at the Friedrichshafen Hamfest. I think I paid $120 for it. You can buy it any day on eBay for about that same amount. It's you search on BG7 TBL, and there's a lot, and it's another whole subject about the IC 9700. When they first came out, they were virtually castrated by the community for having lots of drift. Well, believe it or not, it met the spec, and people just weren't smart enough to figure out that the spec really at 1.2 gigahertz, a half part per million kind of oscillator is not good enough for digital work. On 2 meters, I think it's adequate, even without the GPS disciplined oscillator. When you go above that, you need it. There's another modification you can make internal to the rig that really uses and syncs in GPS. ICOM put out a software update where they take what was supposed to be just a calibrate GPS signal you put into it to where it would do and look at this oscillator and make corrections to it. So it's not a perfect solution, but it's way more than adequate than you need. And as I say, yes, it's $100 or $150, but if you bought them a brand new fancy one, some of those can get extremely expensive. But there's a lot of small used ones or sort of new that are plenty good.
So you just squirt the 10 megs into the back of the rig?
Yes, it's got a 10 megahertz output. You got to be careful, and the rig only accepts a fairly small signal. So I've got an attenuator in line with the disciplined oscillator, and that puts it down at the level that the rig likes.
Right, great. Thank you. Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, Roger, on the chat, Richard said that Leo Bodner on leobodner.com are selling GPS DOs for as cheap as £99. If you look on their website, there's a mini precision GPS DO for £99 and a more expensive one for 150. So similar price.
I thought he might be able to get one for 20 quid, but it seems not. Thanks.
Okay, anyone else with a question to or a comment to Steve? No, if no one's got anything, just a couple of things on the chat, Steve. A couple of people have asked, would you, obviously we'll make the YouTube video of this available on our Facebook page, and it's also will be available through a link on our website as well. So you're welcome to look there. But a couple of people, Steve, have asked if you would let us have the slides, because some people would like to look at the information you presented on the
Yes, I'll send them to you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if you do that, that will be really helpful. I'm just checking on the other bits of information whether there's anything else in the chat that people were asking. Yeah. No, apart from that, I think that's it. Well, look, can we show our appreciation first of all to Steve in the normal way? Thank you, Steve. That was really enjoyable. Very good.
Thank you. I appreciated the opportunity to talk to you all today.
Yeah, no, it was fascinating, Steve. I really enjoyed it, and I mean, as I said when I introduced you and introduced the topic, when we've been running these meetings on things that lots of us, the majority of us, haven't tried, you end up at the end of it thinking, do you know, that's something I'm going to go and have a go at. You know, I think for a number of people watching tonight, there will be a number of people wanting to follow in your footsteps. Sadly, of course, we're not allowed to run 1 kilowatt.
Yeah.
So we're limited to 400 watts
Right.
in the UK. So,
You just need a bigger antenna.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
One thing that I can tell you is that our DX club, North Alabama DX club, I frequently give presentations there, probably twice a year. But our club newsletter is pretty amazing. So if you go to North Alabama DX Club and go down to what we call the Long Path, our newsletter, I just about every month have an article in there that I talk about various things that I've done in that month and things I'm working on. And it's not all Moonbounce related. It can be all kinds of crazy things. The December issue, I wrote an article about Heathkit stuff. Our theme that month was 1960s radios. And since I was active in the 60s and such, I talked about the various Heathkit stuff. But our newsletter sometimes is 20, 30 pages long every month. And it's like getting a little magazine. So if you've got a lot of interest in DX or in various aspects of DX, and it's not just HF particularly, take a look at our newsletter, and you've got many months of it. Some are better than others, but I think you'd find it fascinating.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve. And Steve, what you just said earlier about the support within the EME community, borne out tonight, Peter, G4URT, just posted in the chat there that if anyone is interested in getting started or looking at it, he's welcome to talk to people. So his email address is available on qrz.com. So thank you, Peter. That's really helpful.
Yeah, I'll be picking Peter's brain about going to the 4 antennas. It's always a challenge when you move to a bigger antenna.
Yeah, I'll drop you a line.
And Steve, I think Justin will appreciate your comments about his helpfulness. Justin of G0KSC from Innova Antennas. He's one of those amateurs selling equipment who's happy to help people reproduce what he's doing, and that's fantastic, isn't it? Okay, on that note, can I thank Steve very much indeed?
Thank you.
And I'm going to turn the recording off. So thank you,
73.
everyone. Yeah, thank you. 73 to you, Steve.
Thanks.